singer. And now you sing this song, you sing all night long. Oh my God.
Welcome to Boek Meester. Last week I spoke to David Grossman via a live video link. Tonight I'm going to talk to Ayelet Gundar-Goshen about her new novel, The Liar. A large part of the audience is with us via the live stream. I hope that you've got a good seat. You can also put your questions to the author by using the chat function. Then we'll choose the best or the craziest questions at the end, and you can ask them yourself. I hope that the technology works good tonight and that you are looking forward to it as much as I am. I hadn't read Ayelet Gundar-Goshen's work before I read her novel, The Liar, but I'm very impressed. The book tells the story of the 17-year-old Nuvar Shalev, who is still at school and has a part-time job in an ice cream parlor. One day, a famous singer walks into the shop and humiliates her, and she runs out. The singer follows her because he thinks that she has run off with his money, and local residents hear Nuvar scream. And to her surprise, everyone thinks that the singer has sexually assaulted her, and she lets them believe it. The Liar is about a girl's lie, but it is also about how complicated the truth sometimes is. Why do we lie? Is a liar necessarily a bad person? And why are facts so unfashionable these days? A warm welcome, please, for Ayelet Gundar-Goshen.
Hello, nice to be
Hello.
here.
Welcome to Rotterdam. Welcome, you're live from Israel. Where are you right now?
I'm in my house in Tel Aviv and in Rotterdam at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Is this also the place where you work, where you write?
Right now, very much because we're under lockdown. So this is the house, this is the office, this is the studio, this is everything.
Mm-hmm. How is Israel doing? Because you're still in the second lockdown.
And we're starting to get out of the second lockdown, but the last 4 weeks were once again deserted streets, everything closed, kids at home. It was a hard time, I think, across the world.
And how is it for you as a writer? Because you don't have readings. Do you write more then, or because of the children at home you have less time?
I don't think of myself as a writer in lockdown. I think of myself as a mother under lockdown. I think when you have 2 little kids back home, whatever it was you were doing before will have to step aside and wait. And there's something almost comforting about it, because there's something a bit narcissistic about us authors. We're always sure that our work is so important and that we need our quiet and we need the muse and we need the time to ourselves, and suddenly there is somebody who is only 4 years old, but he's more important than you, and you have to push yourself aside for a moment, which is not something that we do a lot, I think, in these days.
You're a clinical psychologist as well. Are you seeing more people in this current situation?
This actually did change during lockdown, that we see more people seeking help of, I don't know how is it right now in Holland, but in Israel, more people are seeking help for depression, for family violence, for abuse, since the lockdown began. There is something in being locked together in the same house that is really, it amplifies. So if you're in a good relationship, then you pump up the volume of the good relationship. But if you're in an abusive relationship, then it amplifies the relationship much further.
Does your work as a psychologist influence you as a writer?
I think so. I think they affect each other. I think being a psychologist affects the way I write literature, and I think writing literature affects the way I approach my job as a therapist.
Could you give an example?
For instance, with the girl from the novel. The novel is called The Liar, and it tells the story of a girl who says that she was sexually assaulted when she actually wasn't. And the novel is based on a real story that happened in Israel when it was a woman, not a girl, and she accused a man of sexually assaulting her. And later she confessed that it was a lie.
Hmm.
And while most of the country was condemning this girl, saying that she's a psychopath or a monster, I remember thinking about it from the perspective of a psychologist, because I thought, if a girl like this would enter my clinic and told me this story, then if she's a patient, I can't just say, you're a monster, you're a sociopath, you're a terrible person. I have to try and understand her. And I think this mission of trying to understand people rather than to judge them is the mission of an author. An author always tries to understand his characters, because judging is easy, I think. Understanding is difficult. And I think it's also the job of a therapist. So I think that's an example of the way the both get mixed.
And are you allowed then to use the stories you hear as a therapist, as a writer? Are you allowed to use them?
I never did it so far. I actually, my biggest fear is that I will be writing a novel and that a patient will walk into the room and say something that I already wrote in the novel, because then I won't be able to use it. It's a decision that I made long ago when I started writing my first novel when I was training as a clinical psychologist. And I remember back then I thought, to be able to do both, I have to build a huge barrier between what I hear as a therapist and between the stories that I write down. And even still, you still have patients coming and say, this chapter is about me. You'll say it's not about me, but I know it's about me.
You said, I look at myself in the spirit as a mother. Is it frustrating sometimes that you don't write that much as you would like to? What kind of writer are you? Do you normally write every day, or?
I usually try to write every day. And if I don't, I feel, I don't know, some people feel it if they don't get their cup of coffee once a day. And like the lucky people feel it if they don't exercise once a day. I love it when people say I have to exercise once a day or I just don't feel myself. I really feel myself if I don't exercise. But for me, it's with writing, it's like there's something missing. If I go, maybe not one day, but a week or 2 weeks without feeling the pen in my hand, I really feel like something, I don't know, like a phantom pain, like something, there was an organ that was supposed to be there and now it's missing. But at the same time, I think it's Stefan Zweig, the author, who said that when you go on and you live your life and you go on through your adventures, in a way you are writing, because you're taking in reality, people, the world, and later it will find its way to come out as literature. And I'm thinking, being under lockdown with my kids, it's exhausting, but at the same time, it's the labor of love, and it teaches you so much about your own boundaries and about your own limits, about the love that you thought is as deep as an ocean, and then it looks as small as an aquarium. So I think it's interesting to challenge those boundaries, and I hope that one day when I'll go back to writing, it will affect my writing.
Do you think this period will influence or inspire you to write about it as well?
I think it's too early to know what kind of literature we will write about the pandemic a year from now or 10 years from now. I think it's like when you're standing really close to a picture in a museum. So if I was in Rotterdam, if I was supposed to be, then I would definitely go to see your museums. And when you stand really close to a picture, you're encapsulated inside the picture. The painting is all around you, and it's overwhelming, but you can't really appreciate the painting. You're inside of it. And only when you take a few minutes to go backwards and to get the distance, you can understand what was it there that affected you so much. So I feel, for me, it's too early to know how and when I will write in person or people will write about the pandemic. Did you write something about the pandemic so far?
A little bit, but not a novel or something. No, I'm not planning to write a novel about the pandemic. I think it's too early because hopefully we'll be out of it soon, and then it will be a very short with hindsight, a short period that we were locked inside our homes or wearing face masks. And I think that if you now decide to write a novel about it, and it might be over in 3 months, hopefully, it would be a strange world you describe. So I'm at your side. I think we should wait a little bit and hope it gets over. But still, what is interesting is the mechanism of how families work. It's the same in my house with children. And do you choose to write more, or do you choose to be a better parent? What is more important for you? But I'm not here for a psychologic session with you. I tried to interview you. We'll talk later about your novel, The Liar. But I would like to ask you something about your style. There was a Flemish newspaper that suggested that the surname of your main character, Nouvar Shalev, is a reference to the Israeli writer Meir Shalev, who also has a fine sense of humor and writes wonderful about details like you do. Do you feel affinity with Meir Shalev, with the writer?
First, he's one of my favorite authors. He's one of the authors that I always laugh out loud. You know you're in good hands when you're laughing while reading a novel and people are looking at you and they don't understand what's going on. Because usually we laugh with other people and maybe in front of the television, and you're laughing and you don't see people and yet you are laughing. So it happens to me with Meir Shalev's books. And also he always makes me hungry when I read his novels. There is something about the sensuality of how he writes about food that always makes you want to go out and cook something, even though you don't do it eventually, but you want to just go into the kitchen of the guy in the novel and ask him to taste something from his dishes. So yes, I would say that he is like a reference. I didn't decide to call my protagonist I didn't say, this will be a reference to Meir Shalev, but I love the idea that somebody read this and thought this. And being a psychologist, I think maybe this is an interpretation about me that I didn't realize, but is very much true.
Mm-hmm. You are a secular person, but I read that you always read the Bible when you're writing. What kind of inspiration you draw of the Bible?
I'll give an example. In The Liar, for instance, there's a relationship between this girl who makes the story of the false sexual assault and between her sister. So there are two sisters living in the same house, but one is so beautiful and so shining, and the other sister she doesn't shine. Her name, Nufar, in Hebrew, it means a lily. So the parents gave her this name because they wanted the girl to blossom like a flower. But, you know, she got the name before she existed. They had the fantasy about the baby who will be as beautiful as a flower, and she's not a flower and she doesn't blossom. So you have two sisters. One of them is a walking flower and the other doesn't get to blossom. And then I thought about the story of Cain and Abel. How do you pronounce it in
Cain and Abel, yeah.
Cain ve'Hevel in Hebrew. And I thought about this story about two brothers and their relationship with their father, which is God, and how if one child gives a present and the father prefers the present of one child over the present that he gets from the other child, how much anger can be there, and how the first murder, the first biblical murder in the Bible is actually, as I thought about it, a story about two brothers fighting over the love of a parent, and about agony and insult, and how fast insult becomes anger and revenge. So when I wrote this relationship between the sisters, I had this in mind. I had the idea about how a brother or a sister, I grew up in a family we are 3 sisters. And my sisters are the people that I love the most, but through my childhood, they were also the people that I hated the most, because these were the people who were competing with me all the time on a daily basis on the grace and the love of my parents, who were like God when I was 6 or 5. So I think growing up as a child, you have brothers and sisters the basic movement of the head was to look to both sides to see who gets more love, who gets more attention. That's the mathematics that kids are so good at. They know how to calculate it so well. And then we say, as parents, we say to kids that we love you all the same. I don't know if you also say it in Holland. In Hebrew, it's actually like this phrase that we love all the kids the same. All parents say it. And you're thinking it's a lie because we don't love all the kids the same. It's not the same. We knew it was a lie when we were kids, and now we're saying this lie to our kids. So I feel...
But you say we don't love our children the same, but could we say we love them as much, we love every child the same amount of love? Or is that a lie as well?
Do you think?
Because I have two children, I would never say I love one child more than the other one. And of course, I would agree by saying it isn't the same love.
I think sometimes in the lucky parts of life, to say it isn't the same love is the truth. It's not a lie, it's not a white lie, it's really the truth in the lucky parts of life. But I think in other parts of life, in other phases that the kids are going through, or you're going through, or the relationship is going through, then when a parent said that, sometimes we're bluffing, and we know that we're bluffing. So we use the word in Hebrew, something like to relate. I relate better with just this child and not better. But then you're thinking, well, if for the last 50 years you related better to your oldest son than to your youngest son, are we sure we can't talk about it in different aspects of love? And I'm not sure, and I'm really intrigued by that, because that's what interested me in this novel, The Liar. It's the idea that there is just a certain amount of truth that we can bear in our relationship. We want the truth from our parents. We want to give the truth to our children. We want to have a truthful relationship with our partners. But at the same time, if you get a highly dose, you can overdose with truth. That's just as well as you can overdose with lies. And I think a father-son relationship is a good place to examine this. So coming back to your question about the Bible, I think if you want to write about sisterhood or brotherhood, then you open the Bible. If you want to write about a father-son relationship, you read the Bible, at least for me.
Let's talk about your main character, Nufar. She works in this ice cream parlor, and one day this famous singer Entries comes in the shop, and he insults her. She runs, he follows her, and she screams. And everybody thinks he tried to rape her, and she decides to lie and say it's true. Why does Nufar do that?
At first, when I sat down to write the story, because it was based on a real story, I only knew that a story like this happened. I didn't have the motivation because I didn't know the woman who told the lie. My friend, a good friend of mine, represented the man who was falsely accused of a sexual assault. He was an Eritrean migrant. He was an illegal migrant in Israel. And the woman who accused him of sexual assault was a white Israeli woman. So it was a very charged situation. And at first, when I heard the real story, that's what led me to think that I have to try to write it down, because your question was my question. I thought, what makes a woman do such a thing? And I thought, it's not because she's evil, it's not because she's a bitch or she's a monster. It has to be something deeper than that, something more human than that, something that I can understand as a reader. Even though I didn't do something like this myself, I want the reader to be able to understand this woman and not simply to hate her. And then I thought about the character of this girl who works in the ice cream shop. And if you work in an ice cream shop in Tel Aviv, you know, it's a very hot city. So people come to the ice cream shop, they're really hot from the street, and they're nervous because everybody in Israel is nervous when it's hot and in general. And they come into the ice cream shop and they're being so rude. And, you know, she's the one who's supposed to give them what they want. And they all come and they point at her because they say, I want vanilla cookies, I want chocolate, I want pistachio. They point at her, but they never stop to look at her. So the city runs her over in a way. The big city runs her over because she feels neglected and she feels unseen. And then this customer comes into the ice cream shop and he doesn't sexually assault her. But the words he tells her are so terrible. He assaults her, he humiliates her, but he does it in a way where in Israel, he will not be held accountable for. Because in Israel, if you go into a shop and you treat a woman like a piece of shit, but you don't sexually touch her, then you can go out and it's okay. The state has nothing to say for a man who crushes a woman into pieces with his words. And when she runs out of the shop and she starts crying, she doesn't mean to say that he sexually assaulted her, but people they automatically assume that he sexually assaulted her. And she suddenly gets all the love and compassion and attention that she never got before. It's almost as if the lie is some sort of a dark magic that transform her to some sort of Cinderella, from nobody to somebody. And it's just so addicting and so overwhelming that she can't force herself to say the truth. And she gets captured in a spider web of words, which is something I was hoping that the readers could identify with, so that even if the reader never told a lie like this, I think we all know what it means to get caught in your own words and to say something and then not to be able to stop it or to quit it and to hate ourselves and to be in the situation.
I think this Cinderella moment, as you call it, is a very strong in the novel. But still, then becoming Cinderella means for Nufar maintain or stay Cinderella, and then she has to repeat her lies, and she does that to her parents, to a police officer, to her friends, to her sister, etc. And I thought, what does that do to her? Does lying come easy to Nufar?
I think the first one, at first she didn't mean to lie. It just happened. They assumed and she went on with it. But later she starts doing it. And I think at the same time she feels very, very guilty, but also a sense of rebellion. It's as if the truth did nothing good for her for 17 years. The truth did nothing good for her. And she suddenly realizes that, we usually say that the truth makes people more beautiful. When you say that the truth is beautiful, that the truth is like the sunlight and that the sunlight is beautiful. And she suddenly realizes that maybe it's so for some people, but for other, a lie can be beautiful. It's like makeup. It's like, putting a lipstick. And she's not antisocial. She's, I think, in the deep of her heart, she is a good girl. But she finds this, I often find it with kids when they tell the first lie, that they are intimidated by being caught. But at the same time, there's this wild feeling of, think about being in high school and skipping school or doing something forbidden. There is also a sense of freedom, the sense of I can use words not just as a bridge between me and you. I use the words as a bridge to communicate myself to you. I can also use words in a completely different way, as a hideaway, as a getaway. And I think for her, this is a revelation.
Mm-hmm. The radio and television lap it up and spread the lie without fact-checking. It gets huge. She's invited to a talk show, appears on television. Did you want to criticize the role of social and other media with your book?
Very much, because I thought it's not just about the liar. It's also about the way our culture is today, is that we don't really care if it's a lie or if not, it's not a lie. We just want a good story. We want it injected to our veins as fast as we can. We consume it, the way people consume chocolate. You want your chocolate to be bittersweet, and we want our stories to be bittersweet. And we don't really care about how chocolate is manufactured and how many people are suffering while our chocolate is being manufactured. And we don't really care about how the stories in the news are manufactured and how it affects the life of the people in the news. So I'm thinking about this real story that happened in Israel. People love the story of the Eritrean migrant who rapes a Jewish woman because it's a sensational story that fits into the whole discussion about immigration here. And when they found out that it was a lie, they still love the story, because before that we have him being the predator and she was the victim. And then it switches, and now she's the predator and she's the monster and he is the victim. So we still have the world through the media in this very easy way of thinking about it. As victims and predators, we have the wolves and we have the lambs. And reality is so much more complicated than that. I mean, people can be wolves and lambs at the same time and the same person. So yes, when I wrote The Liar, I really wanted to talk about the way stories are created today. Very powerful stories that have nothing to do with the truth. And maybe instead of hating the liars, we should ask ourselves, what is our responsibilities as readers when we consume this media and when we click in, when we have a hot, spicy title and we don't really care if it's the truth or not.
Mm-hmm. You've said that it was difficult as a woman to write about a woman lying about sexual assault, knowing that it is a serious problem. Why did you still want to do it, to write about it?
At first, I didn't want to do it because I had this idea, but I started writing it and then I got really, really stuck. And I thought that maybe I shouldn't write this novel. I wasn't stuck because of a writing barrier. I was stuck because of a moral barrier, because I thought I just became a mother when I wrote The Liar. And my firstborn was she's a girl. And I remember I thought that being a mother to a girl, I know what a girl who grows up in Tel Aviv will have to go through, because I grew up in Tel Aviv and me and all of my friends were sexually assaulted or harassed. At least some severe cases, some less severe cases, but every woman that I know experienced something. And most of the women that I know never said anything because we were afraid to be called liars.
It sounds to me that Israel is a very difficult place to live for a woman, because every woman will encounter sexual assault, and as a man you can use words to break them down without.
I would say that you're very much right. Until Me Too, you're very much right. I mean, in the university, and when you go to, I think for most of us it was around 16 when we went working. Here, when you're 16, you go working like a summer job. So bosses in the summer jobs, and many in the army, then in the university. But I wonder, do you think it's different in Holland? Like, do you think the rates are? Do you think it's different in Holland? Do you think the rates are different in your country?
It's difficult to ask a man, because I never encountered any sexual assault myself, and I don't have sisters and I have 2 sons, so it's a difficult question. But it will shock me if my female friends will say every woman will encounter sexual assault.
Really? So if, as you have my email, I'm really, really curious if you could check with some of your friends. And a sexual assault and sexual harassment are different. I'm not necessarily talking about somebody grabbing you, even though it happens here also, I think, very, very often. But I can also talk about somebody in position of power, like your boss, who comes and gives sexual offers when you show him that you're not interested, but he keeps on giving them because he's the boss and you're like in a lower status. I'm really curious if it's different in your country, and if so, what's the immigration process. But when I wrote The Liar and I thought about it, I thought about my little girl, and I thought, well, Me Too is such an important movement, and maybe my little girl will grow up in a different world than the world that I grew up in. A world when a woman says that she was sexually assaulted, people don't automatically say she's a liar or she's an attention seeker. And then I thought, do I really want to write a novel about a woman making up a lie, when in reality, most of the women who are assaulted are not liars?
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, if it was a man, so
Yeah.
if
Could this book also be written by a man? Would it be accepted then?
it's a good question. I thought about it from the other perspective. I thought about it. If a man is writing a novel about a man murderer, a man killing his landlord, like Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment, nobody thinks that because one man killed his landlord, then the author is implying that all men are murderers, or Nabucco in Lolita. Nobody would say that if you write about a pedophile, you're actually saying that all men are pedophiles. So why is it that if a woman writes about one woman telling a lie, people might think that all women are liars? And that was the moment I started saying it's okay to write this novel, because I thought if anyone will read this novel as saying this girl told a lie, so this means that all women are liars, then the reading is chauvinistic, not the novel. It's like, as a Jewish author, I write characters of some naughty Jews. Some of my characters are really not nice Jews. But it's not that I think, okay, I'm giving propaganda to anti-Semitism. Because if somebody would want to read a novel of mine as saying something about those Jews, then he's anti-Semitic. It's not in the novel itself.
But I remember the French actress Catherine Deneuve, and she supported men in this Me Too period, and she said we should be careful for a witch hunt on men, and it's the same feeling you have when you read the novel, that it's really a witch hunt on this singer. Because everybody joins the witch hunt, the government, the talk shows, the police. Did you want to challenge something there relating the Me Too debate?
I didn't agree with Catherine Deneuve. I do believe that, I would say perhaps more complicated. I think some of the revolution of Me Too, as every revolution, you see heads are being cut off. That's one of the things that happens in revolution. Revolutions are bloody, and people lose their lives in revolution. And I wish it wasn't the way, but this is how it is. So on the one hand, if you ask me, do I think that the chance of a man being falsely accused, is it worth the whole movement of Me Too? If I think that the world in 50 years from now, no Harvey Weinstein, no political leader, in Israel we have an ex-president in prison right now for rape of a woman who's working under him. So for me, I'm thinking, if my girl could walk in the world feeling just as safe as men do, I think I can live with the price of this revolution. But this doesn't mean that all the cases are true. I hate it when people say, I believe all women, because I think it's, in a way, it's almost dehumanizing. It's like missing the idea that everything is human, that just as you have so many women who really were assaulted, but were afraid to file a complaint, you do have the women who make up stories. You can't say there's no such thing as a woman making up a lie. This is mankind. We have all the things, all sort of human behavior. We have it. And if we try to pretend that we don't have it, then we're not looking, right?
I want to go back to the novel, to the incident. It's been seen by a boy, Lavi, who lives above the backyard behind the ice cream parlor. And he blackmails, he sees the incident and he blackmails Nufar because he says if she doesn't want to see him in the evening, he will reveal the truth. Why does he do that? What does he want from her?
I was really curious by this idea, and maybe this is the Israeli macho. This is a sort of masculinity that we raise here.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that for boys, they are sometimes taught that it's easier to demand something in a loud voice than to beg. So he would rather demand that she'll come than ask her if she's willing to come, because asking her is too vulnerable and demanding her gives him the illusion of power. So we see it a lot with really young kids in the preschools here. When a boy is crying, when it's a girl and she's crying, she gets all the love and compassion. When a boy is crying, the school teacher, the kindergarten teacher would usually say, "Why are you crying? You're a boy." And if a boy is pushing or a girl is pushing, if a girl is pushing, then she's very heavily judged because you're not supposed to push and it's not okay for a girl to be aggressive. But if a boy pushes, then in kindergarten they would say, well, you know, he's a boy, that's what boys do. So in a way, I think we raise our kids here to say, the boys here, to say, think about a piano, you have the blacks and the whites, the keys. Mm-hmm. We're saying to boys, those white keys, the keys of crying or feeling vulnerable, you're not allowed to touch them. You can only play with the black ones. And then you get half of the music that you could get.
Mm-hmm. So, the boy Lavi and Nufar, they end up in a relationship. Is it still blackmail then?
I don't think so. I think for her too, it's easier to be in this form of relationship because of her twisted idea of romanticism and sexuality. I think for her, it's easier to do sexual things when she thinks, well, I don't have a choice, than to say, I do have a choice and I choose to be in this relationship because this is exactly what I want.
When Nufar discovers that the singer has given a prison sentence, she starts to feel guilty, but she still doesn't tell the truth. Why can't she?
I'm not revealing the end of the novel, but there is a period when it has to do with something that I'm thinking, debating over guilt. For I think most of my novels, I'm thinking about guilt and the meaning of guilt. Because, you know, a few centuries ago, when we were all very religious, guilt was a very welcome feeling. So if you felt guilt, it wasn't a bad feeling that you wanted to push away from you. It was a good feeling that helped you to fix your ways and behave better. So if you think about Christianity, but also Judaism, guilt is very important because just like a relationship with a parent, you're supposed to feel guilty when you make the parent angry, but this is the way that you try to improve. But then I'm thinking about Freud and the way he saw guilt as, you know, the guilty feelings and of a very strict culture that won't let you have your sexuality, and then you start having neurosis. And how guilt became, today in therapy, people come and say, I cheated on my husband. This is not a real story of a patient. It's an example. I cheated on my husband and I feel guilty. I want to stop feeling guilty. They don't say I want to stop cheating on my husband. They say I want to stop feeling guilty. Or my mother always makes me feel guilty. I came to therapy because I want to stop feeling guilty all the time. Guilt became a burden. And we go to psychologists like we used to go to priests. We go to them and we pay them money to take away our guilt from us. And it was interesting for me when I wrote the lie to think about what kind of relationship does this girl have with her guilt? Is her guilt something that will change her behavior? Or is guilt sometimes like Persian cats? They come and they can touch you, they can come like this, or they can sit on your knees, but then they go. They just go. They don't sit and stay. And I thought about her guilt as a Persian cat that comes and goes. And she can feel really, really guilty for the entire night, like cuddling with this cat. But then this cat goes away and she goes back to her fame, the fame that she gets as a victim.
Lavi encouraged her to keep lying because he says her story could serve as a warning for would-be rapists. Is Nufar persuaded by this argument?
I think it's an interesting argument because sometimes I think I always have this debate with my partner, with the men. So whenever there's a accusation made in the media in Israel, again, we just have a very famous journalist who was accused, and he didn't get to court, but everybody talked about him. And my partner said, he's really miserable, and all these women are talking about him, and his life are over. If he would rob a bank with a bullet, then he will sit in prison for 10 years, but after 10 years, he'll be out and he can live on his life. And this guy, he didn't rape anyone, he just harassed women, but even 10 years from now, he will never get his job back. Like, his life is completely over. And this debate that I have with debate is a nice word for a fight, right? So in this fight that I have with my partner, I always say, maybe he suffers a lot, but I'm thinking about all the other journalists right now peeing in their pants because they know that they've done the same and they might not be able to do it anymore. And as much as I do pity him, I do think that, once again, perhaps 20 years from now, people will live differently than it was when I was 20 and I was working in the newspaper. And that's what happened when you were 20 and you worked in a newspaper. There was always this 20-year-old reporter that could do whatever he wanted. So I don't know. I think it's a nice argument that he gives her.
The part of the famous singer Avishai Milner, he's being called in a novel. At the beginning, he's angry, but later on in the novel, it seems that he's more at peace with himself. I was wondering, what did you want to explore with this character?
It was interesting for me to think about the option that this situation is the most terrible thing that could ever happen to him, but it could also be the best thing that ever happened to him. Because I found also in my own life that sometimes things that are objectively a tragedy can sometimes change the way you live your life. They can change your existence. They can change something in the most basic way you view yourself and other people, and the way you relate to other people. And sometimes it can be mind-blowing, that the most terrible thing that ever happened to him, being falsely accused of a sexual assault, also changes him in a way that he does become a better person. I wouldn't say that he is redeemed, but I would say that it gives him a chance to rethink his life in a way.
What intrigues me in the book is that the lives of all, I think all your characters are based on a lie. For example, Lavi's mother, the mother of the boy, we've seen the incident. She goes every day to her Pilates class. But Lavi discovers that she is visiting lovers. And her husband knows that as well. But all three, they don't talk about it. And why do they do that? And do their relationships function better with a lie?
think in every relationship and in every family, part of the balance of a family life and of a couple's life and of our inner lives with ourselves, a man with himself, is based on ignoring, concealing, or lying about certain elements that are just too hard to handle. I can see it, in a nation, that's for sure. I think every nation is based on a narrative, and the narrative has its own lies. Because if you want to glue people together, to make people stick together, you have to use stories, and stories of victims and predators always have lies in them. But I also think about a family. I think every family has the lie that enables the family to keep on functioning. And I think that, there's the story of this picture of René Magritte, the lovers. When you see two lovers kissing, it's in a very intimate pose, but they're both covered, they're both veiled. So they're in the most intimate relationship, but at the same time, they do not see each other fully. And I think many relationships are based on this idea that we love each other, but we will never know each other fully. So I wouldn't want to read the thoughts of my mother, and I wouldn't want to read the thoughts of my children, and I wouldn't want my partner to read my thoughts, because there is a lot of truth in our relationships. But
I can understand this all, but I don't want to know about the socks of my mother-in-law or my mom, or might even not want to know about my girlfriends. But there's something to Lavi's mother betrays her husband. Is that the same glue that you mean that we need, that lies can be? Is that not one stop further?
I think it really depends on which relationship, because if a woman feels that her only way to survive in a relationship is to go for 1 hour a day and to be somebody else, to be this other woman, and maybe the man knows about it and he says, if that's the only way to save this relationship, then I choose to be blind to certain elements of my wife's life in order to keep this relationship going. In a way, ignoring together what the wife is doing is a lie, but it's also a very strong piece of truth about the relationship. I think it's always this way, that when you identify a lie, it always comes with identifying the truth that was so unbearable that you needed the lie to cover up for.
What about lying politicians then?
I think, once again, it's a relationship, because we always, in Israel, we always say how we hate our lying politicians. But then again, they don't lie in a vacuum. They lie to people who want to consume those lies. So if we want to talk about the lying politicians, maybe we should also talk about the way the public needs these lies and loves these lies, and how do we treat, like in Israel, if a reporter comes and tells you the truth about something in the government or about something that the military did, do we thank him for telling us the truth? Are we grateful for the truth? Or do we say you're not a patriot? Do we call him a traitor? So I think it's interesting how we all admire the truth so much, but when somebody comes and gives us a piece of truth, we usually just hate them for that. In politics, but also I'm thinking about therapy. So people come to therapy and they pay money to get the truth, right? If you go to therapy, you do it because you want to get a piece of truth after 50 minutes. But sometimes when you give a piece of truth to a patient, he may not show up to the next meeting because sometimes the truth is so unbearable. And sometimes, people come to therapy, but they don't say the truth. So they come to therapy, they pay money, they sit down, and they leave after 50 minutes without saying the one thing that was so important for them because they are embarrassed or they don't know how
Do you
to
notice
say it.
that always, or do you feel that if someone doesn't say everything?
Sometimes you do. Sometimes the lie is like a balloon, like a girl holding a balloon, but hiding it, or like you hide something in your hands and you're excited, not just because you have something in your hands that I can't see. You're excited not because there's something, but because of nobody can see it except you. So sometimes I think that you can feel it. If somebody is hiding an affair or some exciting idea, like somebody just started working on a novel but doesn't want to say that he's working on a novel, you can feel that there's something burning inside this person, but he doesn't want you to know it yet. But sometimes people can come after a year and say, I've been coming here every week for a year, and I was paying to tell the truth about myself, but this whole year was actually a lie because I didn't say that the most important thing. And I think these are so important moments. Oh, toda raba. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think these are so important moments because when people come into therapy and say, I've been lying, the lie is like a huge red flag who tells us there's a truth hidden here. And the truth is bigger than just the lie itself. The truth is that this fact was so unbearable that it was transformed into a lie. So I think I can sometimes ask a patient, what are the areas in your life that you feel more prone to lie about? Because usually that's a good way to know where is it most painful or where is it most shameful for this specific person. And sometimes people lie for something, and when you hear what they've hidden, you wonder why did they bother to hide it from the first place. But for them, it was so crucial.
Interesting. There's a woman in your book who lies about being a Holocaust survivor. Isn't that controversial, I was wondering, in Israel?
The idea of lying to be a Holocaust survivor, or the idea of writing in a novel? First, I think if you write a novel and you just don't want to be controversial, I don't like it when people write a novel intending just to be controversial. That I don't like. Authors that just want to be provocative, do you say? Provocative.
Yeah, shocking, provocative.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like novels that start, with the beheaded body of a woman that was tortured, like HBO series, because I feel like you want to get my attention, you should do it with something which is more than just being provocative. So I really hope it wasn't the case with The Liar. But on the other side, I don't want not to write something that I feel is important and that I feel passionate about, just because it might be controversial. So I thought about the story of the woman pretending to be a Holocaust survivor. Her best friend was a Holocaust survivor, and her best friend passed away. Her best friend from the elderly house. That's what it's called in English, right? Elderly house. So her best friend from the elderly house was a Holocaust survivor, and she passed away. And she misses her so much. And in a way, by taking the identity of her best friend, it's in a way like keeping her alive. Like she keeps telling the stories of her best friends. And through this mechanism, the stories are alive, and it's like her best friend is still alive. And I think also when she tells the story of the Holocaust survivor, she puts some of her own life experience in it. So in a way, she gets recognition for very painful moments of her own life that were never acknowledged. So she's doing a terrible thing, and lying is a terrible thing. Don't do that at home. But at the same time, she uses the lie to keep a piece of truth inside herself. And I think that's part of what I try to do in the novel, is to say, it's more complicated than just saying, you know, lying is bad, don't do that. Because sometimes a lie is really the glue that can keep somebody's life together, not just a nation together. And that we should be very delicate, especially when we judge, because, you know, this moral double standard that we have about lies, that we all hate liars. Like if a friend of mine would lie to me, I might end the relationship because I won't be a friend of a liar. But it's amazing how we can all hate liars so much, but at the same time, you know, research says that most people lie at least once a day. So if I was right now in the audience, I would look you in the eyes and ask, how many of you told a lie today? And then most of the people say, like, it was a white lie, which is a really, you have this term, right, in English and in Holland also, white lie?
A right lie, or what do you say?
A white, like W-H-I-T-E.
A white lie? No, we don't know. We don't.
You don't have it?
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know the translation, but I know what it's for. Yeah, you mean the best of with it.
Yeah, like if you bring me a cake and the cake is terrible, but I say, oh, thank you so much, it's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
In my culture, it's considered a white lie because I'm lying, but I'm doing it for your sake, not for my sake. And most of the people, when they do say that they lied, they would recall a white lie, saying, you know, I lied, but it was for the benefit of humanity.
You don't want to offend someone.
Can. And first, I think it's a bit convenient that we always remember the white ones and not, you know, the deep purple lies, just the white ones. And also, I think that
do they have a purple color for you? The deep lies?
Yeah, the deep ones are purple. I really think so. Don't you see them like these animals in the deep water? You know, like a blue whale or the purple octopus. I think a lie is the perfect purple octopus.
For me, lies are too much connected with the feeling of guilt still. I'm at that phase.
You're a better person.
But would be interesting to, because I've seen some questions in the audience in the chat. I think Christian or Gary.
Can you read it? I can't, my English is not good enough to read and speak at the same time. Could you go over the chat and repeat the question?
No, we have a moderator who chooses some questions and give get the question being read by the person who has the question. Isn't it? I hope it works.
Yes.
I see Terry.
Oh.
You have a question?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I do.
Oh, very good. Thank you. I wonder if you could say something about your relationship with your translators and perhaps give an example of the sort of question that they might ask you.
Oh, thank you for this question. And
Nice.
thank you for opening the camera. It's the first time that I can see people in their houses and they can see me in my house in a literary event.
That seems to be more honest.
So yeah, there's a big issue with translating from the Hebrew. Perhaps, you know, in every language. I will give an example. Nofar in Hebrew means a water lily. It's a beautiful, beautiful flower. And Shalev in Hebrew, like Meir Shalev, means peaceful and tranquil. So this is a girl, and her parents gave her the name a peaceful and tranquil water lily. And she's the complete opposite of that. And I think this is the primary scene of the relationship with her parents, is that they had this anticipations and she's buried under the weight of the anticipations. She was supposed to be a beautiful water lily and she's not. And Levi, the boy who blackmails her, Levi in Hebrew means lion. And he got this name from his father, who was an army general, a macho. And the father wanted the child to be a lion. And the child is not a lion, he's more like food for lions. He's not a predator at all. So both Nofar and Levi have this burden on their shoulders, the burden of their parents' expectations. If you read it in Hebrew, you read Nofar, Shalev, and Levi, you know it immediately because you understand the meaning of the names. I don't have to explain anything, it's there. But then when we were working with the translators, then the Italian translator and the French translator both came to me and they said, we're missing all of that. Well, because in French, Nofar doesn't mean anything and it echoes, it doesn't have a nice echo. And then the French translator asked, would it be okay if the French translator, her name will be Lily? And in the French version, the boy's name would be Léon, which is a lion in French.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting moment because it was the moment when the translators really tried to change the names of the characters so that they will fit the meaning. But at the same time, I thought about it. We had a residency of the translators and they came to Jerusalem. All the translators of the novel came to Jerusalem and we sat together. And so they came up with this idea and I thought about it and they were right that something of the meaning is missing. But then I thought, I don't know who is Lily and Léon. I didn't spend 4 years writing about Lily and Léon. I know Nofar and Levi. So I think that's an example of how gentle and difficult the situation is. And also, do I remember correctly that in Dutch, you have a different word for shirt that has buttons and for shirts that doesn't have buttons? Am I right?
Mm-hmm. True. Overhemd and t-shirt, I think.
Because when my novel was translated to Dutch, I kept getting these questions of what kind of t-shirt is that in chapter 5 section. And I remember I thought, why is she so obsessed about the t-shirt? I don't remember which t-shirt it was. If it was this t-shirt, I didn't think about it. And then she once told me, she wrote me and she said, I can feel you're getting exhausted from this question, but you have to understand that for us it's two different words.
I want to go to the next question from the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, for your question. I think from the screen, is there someone who wants to ask a question? Otherwise, I have enough questions left. The book will be turned into a television series, which is great, I think. To what scene are you looking forward the most to be changed, to be turned into a television series?
I have to say, to be completely honest, that usually it's hard for me to think about a novel being adapted. I know it's good for the novel. I'm just not sure it's good for me as the mother of the novel to see it going away. And I usually don't imagine the scenes. I think it's because, my first novel, One Night Markovitch, there's a character there of a woman, her name is Bella. And she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And when I wrote the novel, I had my vision of who is the most beautiful woman in the world. And I think each reader had his vision of who is the most beautiful woman in the world. Because, for me, it was this girl that I really envied in elementary school. Like, I can still recall her face many years from then because she was the most beautiful. And for my partner, it will be his ex-girlfriend. And for each one, somebody will think it's his mother or somebody. And then when One Night Markovitch was adapted into stage, to theater here in Israel, they took an actress. She's a really good actress, and I guess she's very beautiful. But for me, she wasn't the woman that I dreamed of when I wrote the novel. So I think for me, it's always a little bit difficult when a novel is transformed into a theater or a movie or a series. But if I do have to choose the scene, I love the moment when she runs to the backyard screaming because she's really in pain. He really hurt her feelings so much. And everybody come and assume he sexually assaulted her. And I can understand that because that's what you assume today. And I love the idea how authentic sorrow, like the one she feels, is transformed into this big farce in a split of a second by the power of the crowd. So I guess that would be the scene.
For the research of this conversation, I read some articles in newspapers from you, and you're quite outspoken. But in the novel, there were some places where you could have made political points, for example, about women's rights or the glorification of the army service. But you didn't. Why did you decide to not do that? Do you have a straight line between your non-fiction and your fiction?
For me, I would say the opposite. I usually have a very strict line between, like, Waking Lands. The former novel was about the illegal migrants and was very much about a very hot political issue. I think here it was two things. First, about the glorification of military service. I felt that Levi's dad wants him to go to the military service, to a commando unit. And Levi doesn't really want to do that. He wants to do it because that's what his father wants him to do. But it's not an inner motivation. And I think a boy like this would just hurt other people and himself if he will go to the army. So for me, for instance, that was something that I tried to touch. But what also curious me about being a teenager in Israel is how you can be completely focused on your own life when you live in Tel Aviv. And in a way, like the picture of the lovers we just saw, that you're kissing, but you're veiled, I feel it sometimes with politics. That you can live in Tel Aviv and your eyes will be shut to what's going on 20 kilometers away from you in the occupied Palestinian territories. And I think for me, this was also something to refer to. So the fact that Levi and Ofar are not political characters because they don't give about politics, I don't see, this is not me as the author because I care a lot about politics. I think this is part of, many parts of the Israeli societies choose to be blind to what's going on in there. But I will say that, for example, my next novel is very directly political. I just think that it's not about political, like saying what's now in the news. Sometimes being political is saying something about the human condition, but you're saying actually, for me, something about politics because you're asking what it means to be human and what kind of moral responsibilities do we have towards other people.
Thank you. There's one question from Aruna I've seen. Is it possible to unmute her?
Oh, yes. Hi. I didn't know question or what button to push, but I think I did right. You can see me, right?
Yes, Shalom.
Oh, hello. Good evening. I had a question that has to do with a little bit of psychology. Can you see the question or not?
No, we can't see. Could you read it?
Okay, I'll tell you then. It's about a part of the blackmail. It's about the sense of power. Now, when Nufar is telling the lie, it's also her sense of power. So is this not the law of nature, that we all want to be the best, the greatest, the strongest? Does it relate with each other?
Thank you for this question. I do very much agree with you. I think it has a lot to do with power. I will also say that when we talk about the antisocial personality disorder, when we talk about people who actually are, compulsive liars and enjoy lying, people who enjoy misleading the other, it has to do something with the sense of control. So that if I tell you that I'm not married and we go in a relationship and I am married and I do it again and again, I enjoy the idea that I have this power over you and you don't know anything. So
Yeah.
that's really when you take it to the antisocial level, to a psychopath level. But I think even for people who are not psychopaths and do have moral boundaries and a proper superego and a proper moral stand in the world, it still has something to do with power. Also, I think when you look at the first lie of children, when you look at or if you remember your first lie, the readers remember their first lie. Usually when a child lies for the first time, it's because he fears the control of the parent or the teacher or the school kids. We lie because we're afraid of the consequences of the truth. But also when we lie, we take our fate in our own hands or in our own words. We're saying, I don't care about reality. I will create my own reality with the power of my words. And it's, it's a very tricky way to behave. There's something a bit manic about it. But it does give at least a brief sense of power.
And once you taste the power, you want it more.
Nachon. Once you taste the power, it's very hard to stop. I absolutely agree.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Aruna. I have one last question. The weather is still great in Israel, in Tel Aviv. Will you go and eat an ice cream tonight?
I actually did. I was hiking the desert in this weekend, and I did eat an ice cream today in the desert, and it was very, very warm. It was very hot.
Thank you for what kind of taste did you take? Flavor?
Lassi, like you have it. Do you have it? It's like it's an Indian taste. It's got them mevodim. How do you say mevodim? Like rosehip.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's when you come to Israel for the next meeting.
If it's possible.
When it's possible.
When can we expect you? When are you busy with a new novel?
I am finishing my new novel, but it's at present continuous because of the pandemic. So when schools will reopen, I will finish the last phase of the novel.
Thank you for this conversation, Ayelet, and we hope to see you in Rotterdam in the future. Yes?
I really, really hope to come, and thank you so much for your questions. It was really fun.
Thank you. Okay. I want to thank the audience for being present here, and we hope to be back in December with an author. We can't reveal a name at the moment, but we're busy with it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for the questions. Thank you, Ayelet. Thank you. Have a nice evening all.
Thanks. Have a good night. Litot.